When you come on here on YouTube or some other independent type places, it's not uncommon that you will find people critiquing things about Disney World. I myself have talked about many times about how I think recently the Disney parks have been short-term focused on profits and not as much on guest experience, Imagineering, maintenance, and the things that they used to do, say back in the 90s and the early 2000s. But it's another scenario entirely when you start seeing Disney-friendly media start reporting about these things as well, as Disney Food Blog is reporting that 42% of fans think Disney is quietly ruining Hollywood studios. So we're going to talk about this in today's video. And again, this is from Disney Food Blog. It says Hollywood Studios has seen quite a few changes over the years, from the additions of Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge to attraction rethemes like Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. The park looks completely different than it did when it opened in 1989. The changes are far from over as Disney has announced even more park updates. As Disney fans, we sometimes hold on to the past, which is understandable, but we grow attached to what is in the parks, and change is hard to get used to. Hollywood Studios is gearing up for even more change as Disney announced that a Monsters, Inc. themed land will be joining the parks lineup, leading to the closure of Muppets Courtyard, which they did announce that would be Muppets Courtyard will be going away June 7th. So if you want to experience Muppets, you have until June 7th, and then that entire area is closing down to make way for Monsters, Inc. land. So it seems that Hollywood Studios is moving away from its original theming, which is causing some Disney fans to worry about the park. We reached out to you all, our amazing readers, to see how you felt about these changes, and 42% of you said Disney is quietly ruining Hollywood Studios. One reader said they should go ahead and change the name. Hollywood Studios no longer exist. The park is a catch-all for stuff that doesn't fit anywhere else. Says, I'm afraid Epcot will become that as well. Another reader agreed and said, it no longer feels like Hollywood, it feels like a junk drawer. I think when you talk about Hollywood Studios and Epcot, that argument can definitely be made. I think the original ideas and concepts are completely, what they were when they initially were open to what they are now are vastly different. Now, Epcot, it was never intended to actually be a theme park. It was actually supposed to be a city. And then when Walt died, that got turned into the Epcot that was of the 80s and 90s. And then that has, at that time, there really weren't many IPs. Obviously, we've seen more IPs come in over at Epcot, and really that park is continuing to change. Now you have Moana, and you got Nemo, you have Frozen, you've got Ratatouille, you've got a lot more IPs over there that, I would say like Frozen going into Epcot, to me, that makes way more sense, something going like that into Magic Kingdom per se. But, seems like it's just maybe Epcot and Hollywood Studios become a catch-all. Hollywood Studios has started to steer away from the studio and movie-making aspect of the park as rides like Blackout Tour and the Great Movie Ride have closed. One reader said that they missed the actual studio feel and seeing how things were done. The Backlot Tour and Water Tank Show, the soundstage character meal, the AFI costumes, Great Movie Ride, lights, motor, action, art of animation, etc. They've changed it to feel more like you are inside a real land based on an actual movie instead of a live set. Some people prefer that, and some people don't. I think a lot of the changes, and really you look at Hollywood Studios, which was MGM. Initially they built MGM. That was back in Eisner's day. That was a reaction to knowing that Universal Studios was building their theme park and basically threw together MGM as quickly as they could as sort of a get it out. They got it out there before Universal Studios even opened. And the theme park concepts were essentially the same as a working studio that you could see how the movies worked, become part of the movies, things like that. I think a lot of that may have been the starting point of Disney really reacting more to Universal. And you can make the argument Hollywood Studios may be the park that most has done this in terms of trying or kind of becoming like a Universal Studios in a way, as going much more toward IPs and really, as time has gone on, gotten away from the working studio side. But in the same regard, working studios, you look at Hollywood, you look at movie making, you look at shows. It's not like how it was in the 90s. It has changed a lot. A lot more movies are made overseas. They're made in other states now. There's not many working studios that they even do in California or down in Florida. A lot of the changes there are due to also the movie and entertainment industry end of things, and also the park shift that Disney has gone after. And in my opinion, many times trying to counter or answer for what Universal Studios has been doing. When you look at Toy Story Land and Galaxy's Edge, I think clearly those were their ways of trying to answer for what Universal was doing with the Wizarding Worlds and bringing those similar type lands over into this theme park. So the reader brings up an interesting point. Instead of focusing on how movies are made, Disney is taking the approach of transporting you to different lands based on popular films like Star Wars, Toy Story, and soon Monsters, Inc. Another reader shared a similar thought and said, as long as the lands focus on movies, I understand what they are doing. I like the studio theme from the past, but now it's more like Hollywood movie land than Hollywood studios. While some readers understand that maybe Disney is leaning more towards transporting you into popular films, some do not think that the theming is cohesive. I would agree with that. One reader said that it was too late and Disney had already ruined the park. They also shared that they, quote, find the Star Wars area ugly and boring, and they are taking away Muppets. It's just a hodgepodge of things now. There's nothing Hollywood about it. I can skip this park easily. I've said before, I'm not a big fan, first off, of since Disney's taken over Star Wars, I'm not a fan of where the direction they've taken that entire IP. But Galaxy's Edge to me is a big swing and a miss in terms of what you could have done with that land and what we ended up getting, being, just focused on the sequel trilogy and the idea of instead of, building a land in which from the shows and movies, you just simply created this spaceport and then retconned it into the fact that it's always been around and things like that. I think what we could have gotten versus what we got it's just disappointing. I think you had so much potential what you could have done with the Star Wars land, and the final product here, I think for the most part, at least in my opinion, is very underwhelming. But I do think a lot of it speaks to where Star Wars is just at in general. I don't think it's in a good place, and I think that leads to also the feelings about Galaxy's Edge. But I agree with that there. While it can be hard to the changes that Disney is making to Hollywood studios and across all its parks, we will just have to wait and see how these new projects are developed and look forward to enjoying them in the coming years. I mean, the headline kind of comes out, it's obviously geared more toward the fans are saying this. And again, you're talking about Disney Food Blog, like they're very friendly to Disney. So I'm not expecting a scathing article coming from Disney Food Blog. I'd be very surprised if that was the case, as they make all their money covering Disney, and I think they also cover Universal Studios now. But so I'm not really expecting that, but it is interesting that they're even giving credence to this on some level, as I do think a lot of the, I guess you just say, historical Disney fans have been turned off by what Disney's been doing. They've been changing a lot of things in the parks outside of just, that's not even bringing into the fact that the price increases, the things have been taken away, the now charging for what used to be included with Fast Passes, now Lightning Lane charging for those things, and just, that stuff we've talked about here. And I think separate from that conversation, just the changes in the parks in terms of the experiences, it seems much more, I think a junk drawer, while that might be, it might seem like a rough terminology, I think it kind of does, maybe the word hodgepodge is there, where it's like there's no cohesive theming to this. It's just this land here, this land here, this land here. And Universal, people argue, well, Universal does that, but Universal is also not Disney, and Universal always has kind of been that way in ways they go about their parks, whereas Disney does have the historical aspect of the things they used to do, the theming and the immersion of things. And I do think in recent history, they've definitely been reacting to Universal, and the hits of the Wizarding World, I really do think made Disney think, oh, we have to go in with these immersive lands, which I'm not against immersive lands. I mean, we talk about ever since Universal Studios really got the Wizarding Worlds going, and I think shocked Disney with the level in which they were able to do it. You got Pandora, you got Toy Story Land, you got Galaxy's Edge, and then you're getting Monsters Inc. Land. You're getting these new ones that they announced at D23. I do think those are a direct reaction to what Universal's been doing. And instead of being more innovative about what they go about it, I think they've been just looking at places in which they can plop down IPs and put more things into the parks. Now, there are crowds of people that enjoy that, and I think that younger crowds that maybe don't have the historical, knowledge or haven't been going to the parks a long time, that would appeal to them more. So it may just come down to demographics. If you're a lifelong Disney fan that's been going to the parks a long time, these changes obviously are going to be met with a lot of like, what is going on here? This is not how it used to be at all. But I do think it comes across as reactionary. And I think that's the thing I would say about Disney in the past 10 years especially, has been very reactionary to what Universal's been doing, because obviously Universal's been eating into market share. They've been gaining popularity. A lot of people, talk tons about the Wizarding Worlds, of how well those lands are done. And then obviously you got Epic Universe coming that looks like it's taking everything they've done with the Wizarding Worlds and other areas and really culmination of putting it into that new theme park. Obviously, not only the lands, but the rides with Hagrid and Velocicoaster. I do think it has forced Disney to sort of react and think like, people like these things. We need to do our own versions of it. But I guess in the defense of Disney, Hollywood Studios, again, since its opening, has been a little bit of a hodgepodge, if you will. It was a thrown together theme park. It didn't have a lot of opening day attractions at all, and it's never really had a consistent theme to it. So if any park was going to become sort of an IP land park, I do think Hollywood Studios does make the most sense. So I think if you're talking about a Cars area, I think that would make a lot more sense in Hollywood Studios. Like treat that park more like your Universal-esque type park. I actually don't have much of a problem with that because it doesn't have the historical relevance of, say, Magic Kingdom or Epcot. And I think that, again, with how things have changed in the entertainment industry, it working as a working studio, you go behind the scenes, really isn't as feasible now as it was. There's just not as much things happening both California and Florida to really sustain that type of a theme park. But the other parks, I think a lot more of those choices do need to be more carefully considered. Like you're talking about Magic Kingdom and Epcot and Animal Kingdom. I think those need to be much more consistent with what those parks are supposed to be and the type of theming and immersion of those parks. But I think Hollywood Studios, if you wanted to call it a junk drawer of IPs, it would make sense to put it in Hollywood Studios to be that. So I suppose on that level, it's not wrong, but I also it does make sense in terms of if any park was going to be that, I do think Hollywood Studios would potentially make the most sense to be that type of park. But obviously there's a lot of, feedback and a lot of reactions to Monsters Inc. replacing the Muppets, and some people are not happy about that. Obviously, Muppets has a strong fan base there, but they are moving some of it back over into Rock and Roller Coaster. So Hollywood Studios is changing a lot. Magic Kingdom is going to be changing a lot. Epcot has changed a lot, and Animal Kingdom is currently changing quite a bit. So, in terms of how these changes will go, how they will be received, that is something we'll have to wait and see, because obviously they have a lot riding on it with Epic Universe opening for Universal Studios, and a lot of these changes are meant to be an answer for Epic Universe to try and bolster attendance to the Disney parks. Have to wait and see how that ends up shaking out. But in terms of this article, again, I just want to bring highlight to it because I was a little surprised to see it from Disney Food Blog. And the way they, you just typically don't see that from the Disney-friendly media here. So it was a little surprising. Wasn't a scathing article, wasn't expecting it to be, but more or less putting it on like what the fans think. Either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. If you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, do you think Hollywood Studios is turning into a junk drawer of IPs? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.